This is MTG Burgeoning, and in this video we are going to update and upgrade our Morophon the Boundless Changeling EDH deck. We are going to make changes and upgrades to both the deck itself and the Changeling pool. If you are unfamiliar with what this deck build is, trust me, there have been many videos showing its gradual evolution. Basically what we have is a deck here with 12 blank spaces in it. So we have an 87 card deck here and one commander for, of course, 88 total cards. Those 12 blank spaces here are filled from 12 of any of the Changeling pool representatives. Currently, there are well over 100 different cards representing over 100 different tribes. Each one of these cards represents one of those tribes. We pull 12 cards from the Changeling pool. We shuffle them into our Changeling deck. That way, we ensure that our Changeling deck is never the same game twice. You can check all of the different Changeling pool representatives and the deck list itself by skulking around in the description below. There you'll also find the video deck series and the, probably at this point, somewhat updated deck tech, but eventually we'll replace that as well. Before we continue, for anyone who's unfamiliar with what Morophon does, we have a legendary shapeshifter 6/6 for 7 generic mana. Morophon is a changeling, which means it is every creature type at all times. As Morophon comes into play, we choose a creature type, and then spells of the chosen type we cast cost WUBRG less to cast. This effect reduces only the amount of colored mana for those costs. So if something comes in and we say we pick rats and we have a rat in our hand and it's 2 generic mana and 2 black mana, well, the WUBRG reduction will be just 1 black mana. And then, of course, other creatures we control of the chosen type will get +1/+1. So with Morophon, we are running the ultimate Changeling deck with the idea that since Changelings are every creature type at all times, we ensure that we get the best mix all the time when we randomly or purposefully select from the Changeling pool. So, as we stated earlier, now that we have Morophon, we know what it does, we got a good idea of what the deck is. We're going to update, that's right, we're going to update the Changeling pool first. We have 3 new cards going in and 3 new tribes that are going to be represented. The new tribe going in, it is the 120th different tribe to enter into the Changeling pool, and the card is Biomathematician. Here we have a 2/2 human wizard for 1 in Simic colors. That's 1 green and 1 blue. When Biomathematician enters the battlefield, we create a 0/0 green and blue fractal creature token, and then we put a +1/+1 counter on each fractal we control. So Biomathematician is going to be the fractal tribal representative. Yes, it's definitely not one of the more well-known tribes and certainly will not be mistaken as one of the more powerful tribal leaders, but it is a tribe. They do have a spot that should be in the tribal pool. In the Changeling pool. And this is a good way to point out that not every single tribal representative in the Changeling pool is going to be a bomb and impactful card. Not every tribe can do that, and that should be represented with the Changelings. Changelings are going to be every creature type, and they're not always going to be uber powerful. Still, we get a +1/+1 counter on each fractal we control, and for any of the Changelings that are on our side of the battlefield when the Biomathematician enters, well, each one of them is going to get a +1/+1 counter. So, creature type number 120, fractals. Number 121 is up next, and that card is going to be Thurid, Mare of Destiny. Here we have a 2/4 Pegasus with flying and lifelink for 2 and 2 white mana. Whenever we cast a Pegasus, unicorn, or horse creature spell, we copy it. That means that if we're casting one of those spells and it's a permanent spell, the copy becomes a token. Now suddenly, whenever we cast a Changeling, as long as it's not a legendary, we're going to 2-for-1 and put 2 of those copies into play and keep both of them. Note that if we cast a Changeling that is a Pegasus, a unicorn, or a horse, just note that that means that due to the legend rule, one of those are going to be sacrificed. Keep that in mind if Third is on your side of the battlefield and you have a handful of changelings. As a bonus, other Pegasi, unicorns, and horses we control get +1/+1. There we have Third, Mayor of Destinies. It is Changeling Tribal Representative number 121, the Pegasus Tribe. Third goes in as number 121, and it represents the Pegasus Tribe. So we have Fractals, we have Pegasi, and we have one more new Changeling Pool representative, card number 122 going in, and that's going to represent the Turtle Tribe. Here we have the Ambling Storm Shell. That's easy for me to say. Ambling Storm Shell. You're not reading it the wrong way. We have a 5/9 with Ward 2 for 3 and 2 blue mana. Ward 2, of course, means that if any of our opponents are going to target this turtle with any spells or abilities, that's going to be countered unless they pay an additional 2 generic mana. And whenever Ambling Storm Shell attacks, we put 3 stun counters on it and we draw 3 cards. Whenever we cast a turtle spell, we untap this creature. So we have what seems to be a bit of a dud going into the Changeling pool, but if we look at the layers here, what we have is a very, very reliable card drawing engine, outside of it being hit with any direct removal, which, if that's the case, that's fine. That means that our opponents are going to overpay for that removal. Look at the body, 5/9, and it's only for 5 mana. So we could reasonably assume that we can get this out on turn 4, maybe a little bit earlier if we get super lucky, and then we can attack with this by turn 5 at the earliest, maybe turn 4. Again, we'll have to see how that works out. But the toughness of 9 ensures that it's going to survive many, many combats. So what we're going to do is we'll send this into combat, we'll put 3 stun counters on it, which means that, if a creature has a stun counter on it, instead of untapping it, we remove a stun counter on it. So what the card is trying to get us to do is to attack with it, put 3 stun counters on it, draw 3 cards, wait 3 turns to untap it, but no, that's not what's going to happen here. We'll send it into combat, it will survive because of its 9 toughness, it'll get the 3 stun counters, we'll draw the 3 cards, then during our second main phase, we'll cast one of our changelings, which, remember, changelings are all creature they're all creature types at all times, and we'll untap Ambling Storm Shell. Not going to be a problem at all. Those stun counters can keep piling up on this turtle, but we'll keep sending it into combat, keep casting those turtle spells, keep drawing those cards, and keep untapping and tapping all throughout the game. So it's a little bit innocuous that this turtle is going to lead a huge, impactful charge on the battlefield, but once we start filling our hands with cards and cards and cards, it's going to become readily apparent that Ambling Storm Shell might be one of the sleeper cards to think about putting into the deck if you're choosing cards from the Changeling pool. All right, so we have updated the Changeling pool with 3 new additions. Now we are going to upgrade the Changeling pool with 1 swap. We are changing out one of our current tribal representatives, and we're going to replace it with a new, more powerful one. This tip of the cap swap goes to MTG Burgeoning subscriber Zephyr, who made the suggestion about making the swap. It was a fantastic call. Couldn't wait to make the change and make sure that he got the credit for announcing it. Thank you very much, Zephyr. So, the tribe in question, well, it is the Sapling tribe. So here was the current, well, I shouldn't say current, here was the tribal representative of the Saplings. It was Slimefoot the Stowaway. It was a 2/3 legendary fungus for 1 in Golgari colors, and whenever a sapling we controlled died, Slimefoot would deal 1 damage to each opponent, and we gain 1 life. We could pay 4 generic mana to create a 1/1 green sapling creature token. So the global life drain effect is okay. We don't really want to send too many of our changeling cards to the graveyard, and we don't have a ton of token makers in the deck itself. I mean, I'm sure it would be very easy to just pick cards from the Changeling pool to create a token-centric Changeling build, but Slimefoot the Stowaway by itself, mixed with 11 other cards, it doesn't really give the same kind of oomph that we're hoping for from the tribes in the Changeling pool. And plus, paying 4 generic mana for a 1/1 green token, that's not going to get it done on any day of the week, especially Friday Night Magic. So Slimefoot as the ex-Saproling tribal representative is going to be replaced by Zephyr's suggestion of Tendershoot Dryad. Now here we are upticking the overall mana value by 40%, going from a total of 3 to 5. And the body is the same, except actually the body shrinks a little bit. Slimefoot was a 2/3, while the Tendershoot is a 2/2. But the additional mana will be well worth the investment. So we're looking at 4 and a green for a Dryad with a 2/2 body. It has the Ascend mechanic, which means if we control 10 or more permanents, we get the City's Blessing for the rest of the game. That is not going to be a problem in many, if any, commander decks at all. This is EDH. We put permanents into play all of the time. So we should just automatically bank on having the City's Blessing. And at the beginning of each upkeep, we create a 1/1 green Saproling creature token. That's the ability by itself. That is independent of having the City's Blessing. And note that this isn't a beginning of our upkeep trigger. This is a beginning of every upkeep trigger. So if we have 3 opponents and we're sitting down at the table with, that's 4 1/1 Saprolings in a round of turns. And if we have the City's Blessing, then Saprolings we control get +2/+2 from Tendershoot Dryad. This is a walking army, and we are happy to put the Tendershoot Dryad in the Saproling creature token spot and kick out Slimefoot the Stowaway. All right, so there you have it. We have 4 changes to the Changeling pool. Haha, see what I did there? 3 additions and 1 upgrade. You can tell me your thoughts about those changes in the comment section below. You'll give me a moment here now so I can take these cards, push them over here to the side, and then we can start working on updating and upgrading the deck itself. There we go. A nice clean space for which to work. All right, so you're going to have a lot of ranting and raving during these changes because the madness, and I'm not talking about the wonderful mechanic, but the madness has to end. The push, the drive, the ambition to make this a 100% dedicated flavor Changeling deck has to fall a little bit in the realm of expectations. We ran into a lot of fundamental and functional problems in trying to go 100% flavor, and as we go by with each addition, each swapping out, each improvement with the cards going in and the cards coming out, I'm going to explain to you exactly where this is coming from. These changes are not done lightly. I spent the better part of 6 weeks, maybe longer, playing nothing but Changelings at the EDH table. I played probably the equivalent of 4 or 5 dozen games with this deck, all different types of Changeling representative combinations. That I'm completely happy with. It's over here, the deck, that we have to tap the brakes. We have to back up a little bit if we're expecting to be able to not necessarily be competitive at a CDH level, because we are nowhere near that, but just competitive in the fact that we need to have a better way in which to cast our spells and to interact with our opponents. And again, I'll explain that as we move forward. So, let's begin. The first card that's going in that was taken out based upon our desire for flavor, which let's face it now, we're going to say that some of this was a flavor fail. The first card going in, or should I say the first card going back in, oh, I almost did it backwards, see? Glad I looked first. Should have done that off camera to be a little more professional, but hey, what are you going to do? All right, here we go. All right, the first card going back in to the deck that was taken out because of our desire for flavor, that was Sol Ring. Yep, we took that out. We were thinking that, okay, We're going to go 100% tribal theme, 100% changeling theme. I'm not going to keep going over that throughout the explanations of why these cards were taken out or why they're going back in. Just let that sink in that we went overboard with the zest for tribal desirability. Changeling, synergies, all of it. It's going to get pulled back a little bit. And the first thing that's going to happen is the Soul Ring is going back in to the deck. That's going to happen. That's the first card going in. The card that it's going to replace is a land. It's actually going to replace one of our land slots. Now, I know that's a little bit of a different thing because when we do our Up and Up series, we usually try to isolate card for card swapping with the understanding that the card that's going in is better for the deck than the card that's coming out. Once in a while, there is a little bit of a crossover with the card types, and this is one of those occasions. But the change makes perfect sense when you think about it. So the Eldrazi Temple is coming out, which was a land that tapped for a colorless, or it tapped for 2 colorless, which we could spend only to cast colorless Eldrazi spells or activated abilities of colorless Eldrazi. After the fact newsflash, the only colorless Eldrazi in the entire build is Morophon itself. Outside, of course, if we have an artifact, a pure colorless artifact creature option that comes out of the Changeling pool, and we have Maskwood Nexus in play. So we put this card in with the mindset that we were just going to, hey, Eldrazi Temple, even though we can't use its colorless mana to cast non-creature spells, we can still cast our Changelings. It'll be okay to take the Soul Ring out. Now, because we don't have colorless Eldrazi. The Eldrazi in our Changeling pool is dramatically colored if we have the Maskwood Nexus in play. So what we're really doing is just taking out a land that produces a colorless mana. That is a fine swap. Soul Ring's 2 colorless mana can be used to cast any spell, where Eldrazi Temple was really just going to help us get Morophon into play a little bit quicker. That swap, absolutely no problem with that whatsoever. Oh, I need like a shade right there. All right, card number 2 going in to the actual Changeling deck itself, and that is Anguished Unmaking. You're going to see a little bit of a theme here. We need to have an upgrade of removal. Over the course of all of those games that I played, removal, reliable, good removal was definitely missing. And I'm going to explain a little bit more after I, showcase what an Anguished Unmaking is. We all know what this card is. Instant speed, 1 colorless, Orzhov colors, exile target non-land permanent, and we lose 3 life. So that's any permanent that's not a land, and all we have to do is pay 3 life to do so. So that's 1 removal spell that's going to be put into the 99 of this deck. And an additional removal spell that helps us to deal with permanents is going to be Chaos Warp. Here we have 2 in red, instant speed. The owner of target permanent shuffles it into their library, then reveals the top card of their library. And then what we have to do... let's just pause this for a moment here. All right, my apologies there. We got a Chaos Warp here that the owner of target permanent shuffles it into their library and then reveals the top card of their library. If it's a permanent card, it goes on to the battlefield. We know what this card does. I'm sure we all have a fantastic Chaos Warp story. Let me know about your favorite one in the comment section below. But still, we are taking the removal a little bit more seriously in this build. And I'm going to explain the exact reasoning why. There was a particular game that I was playing, and this is not an overreaction to just one out of many, many different games that I played, but there was a game that I was playing where I thought I was going to just absolutely crush, dominate, and destroy because of what I had going on. So I had the Maskwood Nexus in play. Everybody knows what that does. Every creature has every creature type that you have in play and in your hand and all that other stuff. And then I also had these 2 creatures on my side of the battlefield. They were both from the Changeling pool, of course. They were both on my side of the battlefield. I had Coma. So you guys know what Coma does. 6/6, can't be countered. At the beginning of each upkeep, we create a 3/3 blue serpent creature token named Coma's Coil. Okay, so every single upkeep for every single player, we're creating a 3/3 blue serpent. Now, with the Changeling pool, with the Maskwood Nexus, that creature was every creature type. So when the Coma's Coil came in as a serpent, it also was a Sphinx. So it was also being triggered by Unish. because whenever Eunice or another Sphinx came into play under our control, we revealed the top 4 cards of our library. An opponent would separate those cards into 2 piles, and then we put one pile into our hand and then the other into our graveyard. So every single upkeep, this was happening, and I was getting more and more cards in my hand. I was getting more and more of the tokens, and I was just going to absolutely end up dominating. Except, stupid enchantment, one of my opponents had a Light Mine Field in play. Now, this is not a very well-known enchantment. I actually have a copy of it was it in my Angel deck, I think? I think it might be in my Angel deck. I don't remember. But someone was playing Planeswalkers and had the Light Mine Field on their side of the battlefield, which it's an enchantment. I think it's 2 and 2 white mana, and what it does is whenever any number of creatures attack, each creature is dealt damage equal to the number of attacking creatures. So if you attack with 2 creatures, each creature is dealt 2 points of damage. If you attack with 3 creatures, each creature is dealt 3 points of damage, and so on and so forth. So as I was amassing all of these Coma Coils, I could not overrun an opponent with them. I couldn't attack with them because the Light Mine Field would have just killed them. And sending 2 3/3s was going to do nothing because they were going to get annihilated, because 1/1 chump block will actually kill the 3/3 because of the damage that was being done by Light Mine Field. So I'm like, oh, this isn't going to be a problem. I'll just bide my time. Eventually, I'll pull a removal spell that gets rid of the enchantment. It's only a matter of time. I'm seeing 4 cards every single upkeep, and then I'm also drawing my cards for turn. It's only a matter of time until the Coma Coil Sphinx combo with Maskwood Nexus in play gives me a piece of removal to get rid of the Light Mine Field so that I can swarm my opponents with my Coma Coils. Until it didn't. And I never did. And I ended up losing in a game that I should have won so much sooner. Frustrated, I went through my library to find where is my removal? What could I have done to get rid of this enchantment? And the answer was nothing. There was nothing in here to get rid of artifacts or enchantments. The only way I was going to be able to do that is with a Masked Vandal. And the Masked Vandal was long gone before I was able to get to that card. There was no chance that was going to happen. And it was a creature had to come into play and had to exile something from my graveyard. And that just never happened. That was it. There was no other removal. There's no artifact or enchantment spells in this. I'm sorry, there are no instant or sorcery spells in this deck that get rid of enchantments or artifacts. That's it. There was none. And it was at that time where I'm like, all right, we have to pull back a little bit and we have to fix the removal spell in here, because the changeling idea, the changeling theme, the portion of it was working exactly the way we wanted it to, except for the stupid Light Mine Field. And if we would have had a card like Anguished Unmaking or a card like Chaos Warp to deal with a permanent like that, we would have won that game with no problem. Except we just piled up Coma's Coils, piled up cards in our hand, and sat there and did nothing. That's not going to happen again, folks. That is it. We are done with that. So the Anguish Unmaking is going to go in, the Chaos Warp is going to go in, and the cards that they're going to replace are going to slightly weaken our overall Changeling and Tribal theme. But that right now is based more out of necessity than our disdain for what we're trying to accomplish with our Changeling deck. So Anguished Unmaking is going to replace, oh, actually I made a mistake here, Patchwork Banner. So what we're doing here is what we talked about a little earlier, is that we're going to go with not so much a card for card swipe. We're not going 1 instant for an instant. We're not even going to go 1 instant for a different type of instant that does something else. Here we're going to go completely different. We're going to take out one of our lesser mana rocks, because mana ramp is not a problem for us in this deck yet. We're going to talk about that, because we're addressing that later in this video too. So the Anguish Unmaking is going to go in to improve our suite of removal while we slightly weaken what's already a strength in the deck in Patchwork's Banner. This was a mana rock that was 3. It acted as an anthem because when it comes into play, we chose a creature type, and then creatures of the chosen type get +1/+1, and it also taps for 1 mana of any color. So we can slightly weaken that. We're not going to miss the anthem. We're not going to miss the anthem theme at all because we have so many of those already jammed into the Changeling pool, and we're not going to miss the mana ramp from that card very much at all if we miss it at all. And Chaos Warp is going to replace Spitflame. Now here, Spitflame was included because of its synergy with dragons, and it's an instant 2 and a red. Same thing with Chaos Warp, and it dealt 4 damage to target creature. So it could deal with a lot of creatures. It doesn't get rid of all of them, of course. What was so appealing about putting Spitflame into the Changing pool is that whenever a dragon came into play under our control, we could pay a red mana to return Spitflame from our graveyard to our hand. So in that way, we could still keep popping those utility creatures, those little nuisances, maybe sending them back to the command zone. But it was a reusable spell that we could deal direct damage to creatures with smaller toughnesses. Well, we need to be, like I said, more powerful and more versatile with the removal in this deck. And that means that Chaos Warp is going to go in and it's going to take the place of Spitflame because it's going to do more with its one casting than the multiple times that we could cast Spitflame throughout the game. Again, we have other removal spells that are Changeling and Tribal specific. We're slightly weakening that so that we can put in a couple of better ones. All right, the next couple of cards that are going in, they also have a little bit of a story too. So I'm just going to pull them both out at the same time for the purposes of saving on redundancy. And it's simply a basic mountain and it's a basic forest. And they're both going in, a basic mountain and a basic forest, which at this moment were absent from the actual Changeling deck. Basic plains, yes. Basic island, yes. Basic swamp, yes. No to the mountain and no to the forest. And what it's going to replace is it's going to replace Brotherhood Headquarters, which was a land that tapped for a colorless, but then it tapped for 1 mana of any color, but we can only spend that mana to cast an assassin spell or a spell that has free running, or to activate the ability of an assassin source. So we have many cards like this already in the 99 of this build that tap for a colorless or tap for 1 mana of any color that we can only use on a specific creature type. Remember, all of our changelings are all creature types at all times, so we could use that mana to cast any of them. However, we couldn't use that mana to cast other spells. So what we need to do is we need to kind of dial back all of the, I don't want to say gimmicky, but we don't want to over-inundate our land base with lands like this because we need the colored mana to cast our other spells too. So let's say that the mountain is going to replace Brotherhood Headquarters and the forest is going to replace Temple of the Dragon Queen. Now, this card, I misinterpreted this card slightly when I first put it into the build, but then decided to just settle on it anyways. No longer. This came into play, and we reveal a dragon card from our hand, and if we do, wait a second, as this enters the battlefield, we may reveal a dragon card from our hand, and Temple of the Dragon Queen would come into play untapped, unless we revealed a dragon card this way or if we control the dragon. So more often than not, it was probably coming into play untapped, which wasn't a big deal either way. It's just that when it came into play, we chose a color, and then we tapped this land for 1 color of that mana. And then that was it. It doesn't even give you 1 mana of any color like Brotherhood Headquarters does. So what really, in all honesty, it just acts as a basic land. Yeah, it can fix our mana immediately for that turn, but outside of that, it ends up becoming a basic land. It taps for 1 mana of any color, which is exactly what any of those 2 basics do. So in a lot of ways, that land was even weaker than Brotherhood Headquarters and actually shouldn't have been put in the deck to begin with. But I just, well, it happens. So we're moving forward, and we're not overly weakening the lands that we have that are going to act as, tribal-centric lands. We still have Cavern of Souls in the deck. We still have Haven of the Spirit Dragon, and we still have Bucolic Ranch. Now, we decided to keep these 3 over Brotherhood Headquarters, basically because they do more than what Brotherhood Headquarters can do for us. All that can do is really generate colored mana for our assassin spells, our free-running spells, and assassin abilities. Where Cavern of Souls, well, we all know that's going to prevent counterspell. Haven of the Spirit Dragon that allows us to recur something from the graveyard, and Bucolic Ranch lets us dig through the top of our library. So those 3 lands were safe while we got rid of the Brotherhood headquarters. And we're not even done with the lands yet. The next land going in is going to be a Blood Crypt. Again, we need to have a better dispersal of the colored mana in this deck so that we can use it more for than just our creature spells. We all know Blood Crypt, it is our Rakdos shock land. And with Blood Crypt going in to the 99, the land it's going to replace is Secluded Courtyard. Now, Secluded Courtyard is just going to be another version of Brotherhood headquarters. Tap comes into play, except with Secluded Courtyard, what we're going to have to do is pick just one creature type, where Brotherhood headquarters assigns the creature type for us. So we pick the creature type, most likely we're probably going to pick Shapeshifter, taps for a colorless, and then we tap this to add one mana of any color that we can only use to cast a creature spell of the chosen type or activate an ability of one of those creature sources. So that's all we were going to be able to do with Secluded Courtyard. Again, it's very similar to Brotherhood headquarters, and like I said earlier, we needed to diversify our land base a little bit. Going back to the beginning of the video, we have to find a way in which to make sure that our zest for flavor does not override our ability to play the deck. Going back to the main reason why we had to address putting 2 additional basic lands into this build. Like I said, we had a plains, we had an island, and a swamp. It's because of this card, which is also already in the deck, Viewpoint Synchronization. So we can play this for 4 and a green, which is not why we included it into the Changeling pool. Into the Changeling deck. We put it in here for its 4 running cost of just 2 and a green mana. This allows us to search our library for up to 3 basic lands and reveal them, and then put them into the battlefield tapped. Put 2 onto the battlefield tapped, and then put 1 of them into our hand. So what we do is with the 4 running cost, we can cast it for its 4 running cost as long as we dealt combat damage to a player this turn with an assassin or a commander. More often than not, one of our changelings that's also going to be an assassin is going to deal that damage, allowing us to cast Viewpoint Synchronization for its free running cost. I might have said 4 running. If I did, that was a mistake. Free running cast. So what we were doing is we were attacking with a changeling, doing some combat damage. Then during our second main phase, we were casting Viewpoint Synchronization for just 2 and a green mana, and we would have been able to search our library for 3 basic lands. Except every single time I was able to cast this, I had at least 1 basic land or more already on my side of the battlefield. I couldn't even cast this to get the 3 basic lands because there were only 3 basic lands in this library. And I'm telling you, every single time I was able to cast this for its free running cost, there was not 3 basic lands in the library. So then why are we playing with this awesome card? 3 mana for 3 lands. Oh. So out of that frustration, in addition to the frustration of not having the targeted removal needed to win that other game, they were piling up. The frustrations were piling up, and it was getting to the point where we had to make this video. We had to make things right. We have to kind of reset what we're doing in this deck. A card like Viewpoint Synchronization should be a bomb addition for ramp. We have to make sure that we have the lands in we have to have the actual lands in the library to make good on the spell. So many times that happened. Well, it's not going to happen anymore. Now we're up to 5 basics, and we should not have any trouble at all getting those 3 basics, 2 in a play, tapped, and 1 into our hand. Oh, the horror. The horror of those games. All right, we move forward. Speaking of free running, the next card going in is going to be a fantastic addition for our Changeling deck. And actually, we can look at this as a potential game-winning card. Here we have Overpowering Attack. We can pay 3 and 2 red mana for this sorcery, or we can pay its free running cost of 2 and 1 red mana instead. And what we have here is we pretty much have a Relentless Assault type ability. We untap all creatures we control that attack this turn. If it's our main phase, there is an additional combat phase there's additional combat phase after this phase, followed by an additional main phase. So what we're going to do is we're going to send our changelings into combat. One of them or more, hopefully more of them, are going to deal combat damage to our opponents, which will allow us to cast this spell for its free running cost of just 2/1 red mana. Because remember, all changelings are all creature types, so they're going to be dealt damage as assassins. We cast that, we untap all of our creatures that attacked, we have another combat, and hopefully we end up winning the game by casting Overpowering Attack. A fantastic card, a wonderful, wonderful themed potential win condition to add into this deck. With Overpowering Attack going in, we need to take out a card that is just not really performing up to par for where this deck is, and that may surprise you to find out that it's Titan of Littjara. For 4 and 2 blue mana, this was a 6/6 illusion that when it enters the battlefield, we choose a creature type. Titan of Littjara is the chosen type in addition to its other types, and whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, we draw a card for each other creature we control that shares a creature type with it. And if we do, then we discard a card. So the thought process behind taking out Titan of Littjara here is the 6 mana is a bit of an investment to just put a 6/6 into play. That, yeah, when it comes into play, it's going to fill our hand. But at the moment that it comes into play, it doesn't do much for the overall team. It doesn't do much for the board. It doesn't have any synergy with any of the other changeling cards coming in from the pool. And it doesn't do anything from anything else inside the deck. What this is acting as is just a pure draw source that is dependent on the number of creatures we have on our side of the battlefield. I can tell you that there were times that I did invest the 6 mana to cast this, and with the spell on the stack, someone would do whatever they could to pick off or just clear the board like a Cyclonic Rift or anything like that, which I know can happen anyways, it's part of the game. But then here I am investing 6 mana that goes into a 6/6 that enters the battlefield and does absolutely nothing. And then I can only draw cards with it as I get more creatures around it. And are they going to be the same creature type? Because you only get to pick the one creature type, and then that's it. It's not like it's any creature type that you control or any number of creatures that you control. So if you pick the Shapeshifter, which is always the safest choice, but you have a bunch of cards from the Changing Pool in your library, if you have a bunch of cards from the Changing Pool in your hand and you don't have a Masquerade Nexus, the Titan of Littjara is just going to be a 6/6 that draws you a card when it attacks. No evasion, and that's it. The Overpowering Attack is going to do so much more for us because we don't have additional attack phases like that. We have lots of other ways to draw cards, particularly when we look at the Changeling Pool. So that swap makes a lot of sense to me, and I have no problem doing it. All right, we're down to our last 2 cards in this marathon of Changeling, just rambling and hopefully making this deck to be a lot more playable. Not that it wasn't playable before. We did win our share of games. It could have been so much more if the fundamentals of the deck were a little more tightened up, and that's what we're trying to do here. The next card going in is one that I had not considered prior to seeing. Well, how could anyone consider adding a card to a deck that they've never seen before? So these next couple of cards that are going in, they don't have anything to do with changing anything that we saw while we were playing during that 6 to 8 week period of time. These are just new cards that came about that are going to go into the Changeling deck because of what they can do. The first card is going to be Call of the Spirit Dragons. Call the Spirit Dragons. We have an enchantment for WUBRG, and dragons we control have Indestructible. So right off the bat, we're protecting our entire board from getting destroyed. All of our changelings are dragons too, and now they're going to have Indestructible as long as we have Call the Spirit Dragons on our side of the battlefield. That's right, our changelings will still be susceptible to bouncing and, exiling and sacrifice and -X. But the easiest, cheapest, and most popular way to get rid of creatures is to destroy them, and Call the Spirit Dragons is going to stop that. But that's not the only reason why we're including this WUBRG enchantment into our Changeling deck. At the beginning of our upkeep, for each color, we put a +1/+1 counter on a dragon we control of that color. If we put a +1/+1 counter on, if we put +1/+1 counters on 5 dragons this way, we win the game. Okay. So this is going to go under the heading of alternate win condition. Here we have a tribal-specific card that lets us win the game for not dealing any damage, for not attacking, but for putting a +1/+1 counter on each of 5 different colored dragons that we control. That is not going to be as difficult as it might sound, particularly if we're pulling cards from the Changeling pool specifically around Call the Spirit Dragons. That won't be a problem at all. I mean, think of it this way. We can pull the Sliver representative, put that onto the battlefield, and if we have Maskwood Nexus, we win the game. That's right, folks. We win the game. Not necessarily. That's what it seems like. We have to have the 5 dragons. You can't just have the 5 colors. You have to have 5 different creatures that equal at least the 5 different colors. So that's not going to be a problem. It would just make a lot more sense to get as many multicolored creatures onto our side of the battlefield as possible so that we can trigger the +1/+1 counters, because we only need to do that for 1 of each color on 5 stretched across 5 different creatures just to win the game. Wonderful, wonderful card to include into like a tribal build, particularly a changeling build. If we got 5+ creatures across the 5 different colors and it gets to our upkeep, we win the game. And remember, they have indestructible, so outside of any direct enchantment removal, they're not going to be able to destroy those dragons or changelings before our upkeep unless they have some kind of exile effect or sacrifice effect or one of the ones we talked about earlier. So we're definitely going to put Call the Spirit Dragons in as a way in which to have an additional win condition, but plus, let's not overlook the potential it has for buffing. Those +1/+1 counters can add up upkeep after upkeep, particularly if we go through the Changeling pool and we specifically select +1/+1 counter synergies, which we certainly can do. With over 120 different cards, we can build a +1/+1 counter themed Changeling deck that would make Call the Spirit Dragons even more powerful. With that Wooburg enchantment going into the 99, it's going to replace Katerin Summons. Now, this was a sorcery for 1 black mana. We search our library for a mercenary card, we reveal that card, and we put it into our hand, and then we shuffle. So a couple of points about this card. Outside of a Maskwood Nexus, the Katerin Summons is only going to bring a shapeshifter with Changeling into our hand. At this moment, there are not a ton of shapeshifters with Changeling that would require us or force us to search for them with a tutor. We have the Mirror Entity, that guy is great, and maybe the Realm Walker. Outside of those 2, maybe more Reach of the Frost and its, copying ability. Outside of that, I don't see a reason to have this type of tutor in the deck, because without Maskwood Nexus, we can't use this to get a card from our Changeling pool outside of it actually being a mercenary creature, which I can assure you that will be a feat that's as rare as Winter Roses. Losing this is not going to hurt us as much as it might seem, because we still have a couple of other tutors in the deck that are going to help us to get any single card we need, which includes the aforementioned Maskwood Nexus, because of course we already have Demonic Tutor in this build. You all know this. We can search our library for any card and put it right into our hand. Any card. It doesn't have to be a mercenary card. Oops, hit the camera there. And we don't have to reveal it. And outside of Demonic Tutor, we also have Coveted Prize, which under the right conditions is even a better version of Demonic Tutor. It's 4 and a black, but it costs 1 less to cast for each creature in our party. And our party consists of up to 1 creature each of Cleric, Rogue, Warrior, and Wizard. So any 4 changelings that we have on our side of the battlefield, we're going to have a full party. So we cast this spell. We could cast it for 1 black mana because we have a full party. We have 4 different creatures. We have 4 different changelings. That's going to reduce the overall cost of this spell from 4 and 1 black mana down to 1 black mana. And this lets us search our library for a card, and then we put it into our hand just like Demonic Tutor, and of course we shuffle. And if we have a full party, which means we had a Cleric, a Rogue, a Warrior, and a Wizard, then we can cast a spell with converted mana cost 4 or less from our hand without paying its mana cost. So in this way, if we already have the 4 changelings, we're going to cast Coveted Prize for 1 black mana. We're going to search for our Maskwood Nexus, most likely, and then we're going to put it into play without paying its mana cost. So we already have those 2 tutors still in the 99 of this deck. So losing such a limited one like Caterin Summons for a potential win condition card, it doesn't seem like that much of a stretch for us here. All right. Oh, that's a lot of words so far. We're down to our last change here. Get it? Last change in the Changeling deck. One card going in, one more card going in, and that is going to probably, on the surface, once I reveal the card, it's going to be pretty debatable as to if this is the right deck for it. But I promise you, it will be. Now we have a mana rock that is tribal specific, and that is a Mox Jasper. This is a legendary artifact. We cast it for 0 mana. We tap to add 1 mana of any color, but we can activate this ability only if we control a dragon. So I got 1 copy of this from the Tarkir packaging that I was opening, and I was very, very happy to do so. So your first question is probably, Burge, Mox Jasper, why aren't you putting that into your Scion build? Or why aren't you putting that into your Miram build? Those are 2 very powerful dragon decks. Put the Mox Jasper into a dedicated dragon deck. No. And here's the reason why. The Jasper is only going to be activated if we control a dragon. Dragons are expensive. How many dragons are going to be in play that cost less than 5 mana? Not many. The purpose of having a card like a Jasper is that you get it into play as soon as possible to ramp ahead of your opponents, particularly because it doesn't cost anything to cast. So the Mox Jasper is going to work better with creatures that are less mana value than your traditional dragons. I can slam that baby into Scion, but I'm waiting until I control a dragon before I can even tap it. No, I don't want to wait. I want to tap that baby right away. I could conceivably, on turn 1, cast I'm sorry, I said that the wrong way. I could conceivably, on turn 1, tap and cast something with the Mox Jasper. There are changelings that cost 1 mana. There are many of them, and we don't have a problem with doing that. 1 mana, 2 mana, 3 mana. If that card is in our opening hand, it's very, very likely that we're going to be able to activate it at least 1 or 2 times before we could even do it once in a dedicated dragon deck. That's what we're doing. The Mox Jasper, in my mind, is going to work better in a changeling deck where changelings are dragons than it's going to work in a dedicated dragon build, because the overall mana value of changelings, they're going to be lower than the overall mana value of the dragons you're playing with in decks like Scion and Miram, the Ur-Dragon, Tiamat, and so on and so forth. So for right now, the Jasper is in, and I am excited because I think that is going to help build up the deck even quicker. Now imagine turn 1, you're playing a land, you're playing a Soul Ring, you're playing a Jasper, and then next turn you're able to cast one of your changelings. You are already ahead of the game. By turn 2, you could have 5 mana at your disposal. Of course, you'll have to have the changeling in play, but that's what I'm saying. We're already going to have one of those babies in play. So the Jasper is in, and it is going to replace Sliverhive. This was another one of the considerations for the lands that were the lands that, they gave you the color, they gave you colorless mana, but they also tapped for colored mana that you can only use to cast creatures to cast creature spells, or, like the activated abilities and stuff like that. So here with Sliverhive, there's the colorless mana, tap for 1 mana of any color, but we can only do that to cast a Sliver spell, and then we could pay 5 mana to tap this to create a 1/1 colorless Sliver creature token. So 5 mana, and we have to tap the land. So most likely we're investing 6 total mana sources if we talk about 5 different lands and or mana rocks and the Sliverhive. And what are we getting for that? A 1/1 Sliver that's colorless. That is not going to do it. The Jasper is going to be better than the Hive. Yes, I understand that we are sacrificing a land out of here for an artifact, but it still doesn't cost us anything. I get that, and I know what you're doing. You're looking at the overall board here, and you're seeing how we are taking out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lands are coming out, 3 lands are going in. And in the place of the other 2 lands, we have 2 mana rocks. But I like to point out that those are two very powerful mana rocks that I contend are going to actually benefit us more than having the 2 additional lands, like from any of these 2, that are going to severely limit what we can do with that colored mana. All right, there you have it, MTG We updated and upgraded the Changeling pool. We updated and upgraded the Changeling deck. I want you to let me know your thoughts about these changes in the comment section below. But before doing so, I want to take 1 minute to kind of review very quickly a few cards that I noticed that were recent additions that I was playing over that 6 to 8 week period of time. A few cards that were absolutely bonkers when I got them into play. They worked so well. They actually exceeded my expectations, and I want to make sure that I point that out because I don't remember who it was, but there was a comment that was left that said something along the lines of, in the future, when you do these up and up series episodes, can you reflect back on how some of the cards that you put in, how they performed in future videos? And I think that's a really good idea, and that's something that I'm definitely going to start doing in the future. And I'm going to start with that right now. So it's just 3 quick cards that I just want to point out that were absolutely amazing in this deck. And the first is 3-Tree Mascot. This was a shapeshifter with Changeling for just 2 generic mana, and we could pay a generic mana to add 1 mana of any color. Even though we can only activate that ability once per turn, it definitely helped sort out the mana. Fix the mana down here when I had too many lands that would tap for colorless mana that I could only use. When I had too many lands that could tap for colored mana, but I could only use those to cast creature spells. The 3-Tree Mascot helped out immensely by tapping these lands for the colorless mana and then jamming it into here to give me the 1 mana I needed of any color to cast my non-creature spells. I just wish it wasn't an activate only once each turn ability, or else this card would be an absolute game changer. That's probably why they put that clause in there, because they didn't want to make it overly powerful. But this common shapeshifter with Changeling is absolutely amazing in this deck. It is one card that I really want to make sure I have in my opening hand. 3-Tree Mascot doing so much work. Speaking of doing so much work, I can't believe how amazing Poetic Ingenuity is. This was an enchantment that we added. It's 2 in a red mana, and whenever 1 or more dinosaurs we control attack, we create that many treasure tokens. Note, it's 1 creature attacking equals 1 treasure token. This isn't whenever 1 or more creatures attack, create a treasure token. If we send 4 creatures into combat, we're getting 4 treasure tokens. And they don't even need to do combat damage. They just have to attack. Poetic Ingenuity is absolutely studly in this deck. It is one of the cards like 3-Tree Mascot. I want those 2 cards in my opening hand every single game because they are just absolutely game ending. And we didn't even talk about the smaller text here, which doesn't really affect us in a great deal because it's more about the treasure token production than the other one. But whenever we cast an artifact spell, we create a 3/1 red dinosaur creature token. This is an ability that triggers only once per turn. We've got some artifact spells in here, not a ton of them. It's more about creating the treasure tokens, and Poetic Ingenuity is absolutely bonkers at doing that. All right, so those are the 2 of the first 3. We saved the 3rd for the last. And I'll tell you, if it wasn't for this card coming up as frequently as it did, I probably would have lost my mind and disintegrated the land base of this deck much sooner because we were just getting flooded with too many of these lands, and I was not able to cast anything but creature spells, and it was getting a little frustrating. That wasn't the case whenever I had Omo on my side of the battlefield. Oh, talk about a powerhouse. Omo is card number 1 if you're going to build a Changeling deck. If you've got Morophon and you want to build Changeling deck, or you want to try to build this deck, or whatever it is you want to do with Changelings, Omo is your first card added. You're not putting in a Soul Ring first. You're not putting in Poetic Ingenuity. You're not even going to put Basket Nexus. You're putting Omo in first. Omo is a 1/5, so she's got a nice beefy toughness. That's going to be important, so keep that in mind. For 2 and a Simic hybrid mana. Whenever Omo enters the battlefield or attacks, we put an everything counter on each of up to 1 target land and up to 1 target creature. So she comes into play, we put an everything counter on up to one target creature, which could be her, because it doesn't say up to one other target creature, it says up to one target creature, and we can pick one of our lands. When we send her into combat, we do the exact same thing, and that's where that 5 toughness is so nice. In the early game, getting Omo into play and sending her into combat to get everything counters onto our creatures and lands is huge, and the toughness of 5 helps to keep her alive so that we can keep doing it. Each land with an everything counter on it is every land type in addition to its other types. So what does that mean? That means if we put an everything counter on Sliverhive, it's also a plains, it's an island, it's a swamp, it's a mountain, it's a forest. It pretty much acts as a command tower for us. That helps to fix our mana. It helps to preserve my sanity during that 6 to 8 week period of time. Omo was bomb-like in putting everything counters onto those lands and making them being able to tap for 1 mana of any color. And then everything counter on a creature just pretty much gave it Changeling. So if we had some of our creatures from the Changeling pool on our side of the battlefield, outside of our Maskwood Nexus, Omo could put an everything counter on them, giving them that ability. And once those counters started to pile up and more participants from the Changeling pool were getting onto our side of the battlefield, and Omo kept putting everything counters on them, now all other abilities are synergizing with each other outside of having the Maskwood Nexus. So Omo is card number 1. It's a backup plan if you can't get Maskwood Nexus into play, or if it's already been exiled or whatever. Omo is card number 1. She is godlike in this deck. Absolutely, unequivocally the most powerful card in this entire build right now. In my mind, that's my opinion. I will own that. Omo, card number 1, standout card. All right, the word count is probably at about 400,000 for now, so it's time for me to sign off on this lengthy Changeling video. This was a video long time in the making. We really needed to update the functionality. I am extraordinarily confident moving forward that we updated the ramp. We updated the removal. We fixed the color mana. We added 2 potential win conditions, and we thinned out some of the deck of some cards that were pretty lackluster. And in so doing, hopefully we made the overall deck even better. With that being said, let me know your thoughts about these changes in the comment section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Changeling.
Bye.